Hi, everyone. I'm Webb Wright, and I'd like to welcome you back once again to Lucas Group's Recruiter Intel Spotlight Series. Today, I'm joined by Gordon Bowen. Thank you so much for joining us today, Gordon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. So our discussion today, Gordon, is going to be focusing on EHS in the manufacturing industry, specifically during the COVID-19 pandemic. And Gordon, I wanted to start our conversation off by outlining a few of the specific challenges that manufacturing employers have been facing during the pandemic. So these challenges, I think everybody will agree, have tended to particularly be focused on workplace environment, health, and safety, more colloquially known as EHS. And I would say that this is especially true in a lot of ways in the manufacturing industry, considering that employees in that sector typically have to spend such long hours on the floor in close proximity to one another. So I'm curious, Gordon, in your experience as a recruiter working with manufacturing companies, what have been some of the specific EHS related challenges that you've seen over the past year? And how have you been seeing your clients struggle to cope with those?
Yeah, certainly. Like you mentioned, in this industry, no matter what you're manufacturing, producing, making, all of your employees are close together. They're in a closed environment, working with each other sometimes around the clock, whether it's on the floor or taking breaks. In addition to that, you have a lot of folks that are traveling from plant to plant to oversee certain standards, whether it's quality or someone that's on the operations side, just to oversee from a higher point of view. So from that standpoint, it tended to be a little bit difficult as well to figure out what to do. One thing I've noticed with all of my clients, no matter what, again, they're manufacturing, producing, is that a lot of them really took this head on right from the jump. I had called a lot of them right at the beginning of this, right at the beginning when it was hitting America, I should say, back in late February, early March. And you got to remember, a lot of these companies are global. So while it was hitting us at that point in time, they were already seeing some effects overseas, whether if they had manufacturing plants in China or whatever it may be. So I was seeing that and hearing a lot of my clients had already been dealing with these issues, had already been putting procedures in place. So by the time it got to America, they were already set to go. And it wasn't just coming from corporate. It was coming from the employees as well. And one thing that was a commonality that I heard amongst all my clients was that while corporate was pushing it, the employees were demanding it. They wanted to make sure that they were safe, that they could continue to work, not have a COVID outbreak get shut down, because if that happened, everyone loses, right? Not only the employees, not only corporate, but also the consumer as well. So as far as some of the things that I heard that they were putting in place, there's a number of things, whether it's social distancing, that I think that's kind of the obvious, but also mandatory masks. A lot of my clients were kind of again, early on ordering masks, getting ahead of the, rush to get masks. They were limiting travel. So I had mentioned, a lot of folks do travel from plant to plant, immediately put a travel ban on all their employees, instituting temperature takers. So right when they entered the plant, again, every single employee was getting their temperature taken. From a breaks standpoint, kind of somewhat closed off their break rooms or limited out these spaces of when people were taking the breaks, when employees were taking breaks, so on and so forth. So there are a number of things that I think clients were doing right from the jump and right from the beginning to limit the COVID outbreak exposure potential. And it seems to have worked. A lot of my clients that did get ahead of this and did put these things in place were indicating that they were seeing record lows as far as breaks were concerned. So I think that's kind of what they're doing. That's what I've been seeing and what I've been hearing so far.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely been a steep learning curve across industries as employers really hustle to try to incorporate the new best practices that are emerging across industries and find those practices that are going to be the most effective within their particular fields. That's interesting how quickly that's had to happen within the manufacturing industry. And it occurs to me that this is all happening alongside a financial crisis that's obviously global and
Mhm.
nationwide, even more particularly. But within the manufacturing industry itself, how have you been seeing your clients try to successfully navigate the twin challenges of having to tighten up their budget while simultaneously maintaining workplace safety? Um,
Yeah.
so I guess in other words, what strategies have your clients been implementing to improve and maintain their workplace EHS without exceeding the budget and breaking the bank?
Yeah, and you mentioned something too before I even answer that question, as far as making sure the best practices were in place, right? Because prior to this, there really were no best practices. A lot of it has been, hey, let's instead of go a trial and error perspective, which maybe you might do when you're trying to institute a procedure. A lot of it is making sure a lot of brain power has been put into all of these decisions to make sure, hey, we know we do not have the ability to have an error, nor a trial. So we have to put whatever is best that we feel is best into place right away. We can't go off of any previous data because there is no data. But what's been remarkable is that, like I had mentioned before, I've talked to a number of clients across all different industries, and they essentially were all almost doing the same thing. And it wasn't for the fact that they were talking to each other. It was just because I think kind of common sense prevailed as far as, all right, what do we need to do to be as safe as possible to put these procedures in place and make sure everyone's on the same page. So that's something I did want to touch on. I thought was interesting that you mentioned. But as far as financial implications, yeah, a lot of the companies obviously right away went into a hiring freeze. So at that point, you're trying to institute all these new procedures. And at the same time, you can't hire anyone to really help you. So what I've seen is, anyone from a COO that I've talked to, VP of HR, a general manager, it really was all hands on deck as far as who was leading the charge to put these procedures in place. They couldn't really hire someone to help them come in. So that's kind of what I was seeing. It was more of a all hands on deck type deal where folks were making sure they talked to each other, leaned on each other, communicated with their employees to feel what is best, to make sure it's not just an ivory tower decision, but that really is it a true collective, hey, here's what we need to do, here's how we need to be safe, and here's how we're going to do it moving forward, while making sure that we're still staying within our budget constraints as well. Now, yes, they did have to spend a little bit, let's say, on procuring masks and hiring temperature takers, so on and so forth. But I think what everyone realized was that the cost of doing that was going to far outweigh any type of shutdown that they would have incurred and loss they could have incurred should a COVID outbreak have happened.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a moment ago the primacy of communication and of implementing a really top-down method of interacting and engaging with employees to, in your words, make sure that it's not just an ivory tower decision, and make sure that every level of the organization is on board and informed and aware of the new health and safety protocol that are going to be implemented as the crisis develops. And that's certainly a theme that I've noticed across industries as well, just that primacy of being able to effectively communicate with employees. Which leads
Yeah,
me
and
to
one
the
thing
next.
I've noticed from that too is it's almost kind of built even another extra layer of trust and culture
Mm-hmm.
Amongst my clients, where they are communicating with corporate, and corporate's communicating with their employees, or listening to each other. Like I mentioned right at the beginning, while corporate was wanting to do these things, what I've heard is that employees were demanding it as well. So I think kind of throughout this whole process, I guess somewhat ironically, seeing cultures get a little bit tighter and more trust formed throughout this entire process, so everyone can lean on each other, because everyone sees the bigger picture at the end of the day, which is making sure not only everyone is safe, but everyone that's employed as well. Because at the end of the day, this is what we're doing, right? We're making sure people are employed and hired, and these folks want to stay employed. And the best way to do so is to continue working, regardless of political beliefs or whatever it may be. Let's just stay as safe as possible. Let's continue to work. to make sure our plant doesn't get shut down so we can produce our product and then go home and feed our families.
Sure. And all of those concerns that are obviously very much at the top of everybody's mind right now of keeping the plant running, keeping everybody or as many people on the team and on the payroll as possible, making sure that you don't exceed your annual budget, those top of mind financial and logistical concerns have to be balanced with, as you say, maintaining a strong sense of trust and integrity in the workplace. And I would imagine that's one of the biggest challenges that manufacturing employees have been facing right now, is maintaining that balance between those priorities, putting in the effort and the energy and the resources that it takes to actually maintain strong employee engagement and build a sense of trust within their workplace, while simultaneously keeping a lid on, as I say, those logistical and financial ends of their responsibilities. So I'm curious how you perceive the role of the recruiter in this balancing act. What is the primary role of someone in your position who comes in as a sort of an intermediary between clients and candidates, and how can you help to make sure employers navigate this unprecedented and very rocky road successfully?
Certainly. Yeah, I mean, even prior to the pandemic, we see ourselves as advisors, at least here at Lucas Group. We're here to assist and advise and provide our opinions on hiring needs. So whether it's pre-pandemic or now, that's what we're doing, is we're coming in to offer our advice on how to potentially shore up any hiring needs that one may have. Now, pre-pandemic, a lot of it was new hiring. Folks are building plants and companies are hiring like crazy. Right now, slightly different. There's a lot of hiring freezes. That said, there's still hiring going on out there. It's been more so folks that, let's say, are retiring, or if someone leaves to go take another job, replacements versus new hires. But we're still there to help assist our clients with their needs. Even though there are hiring freezes, there are also folks moving around. There's still relocation, not as much, but I mean, even in this just past month alone, my team, we did relocate 6 people within the last about 5 to 6 weeks to various places. So there are still folks moving around, but it's more so making sure it's being strategic and helping them understand what the market truly looks like, and then where we can be of assistance as far as finding those maybe passive individuals that are open to listening. It just has to really be for the right opportunity. And that's where we come into play, because we're able to build those relationships, get an understanding of why a candidate might be interested in making a move. And then from there, assisting the client to let them know, hey, this is what this candidate is looking for. They weren't really active on the market, but we believe there's a potential fit. And that's why we're still, in business. That's why we're still helping clients right now. That's why we're still having reach out to us, and in turn, find right opportunities for our candidates as well, to make the moves should it be a fit.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're all certainly grateful for the work that you've been putting in to keep the essential manufacturing industry and all the employers that fit in that sector up and running. You've been really generous with your time. This has been very insightful, and really appreciate you taking the time to discuss workplace environment, health, and safety, which will obviously continue to be very much at the top of everybody's mind moving forward. And to everybody who's viewing, we really appreciate you tuning in. If you're interested in reaching out to Lucas Group or contacting Gordon Bowen in particular, that information will be provided at the end of this video. I'm Webb Wright, and thank you so much for tuning in to this Lucas Group Recruiter Intel Spotlight series. And thank you so much, Gordon.
Thanks for your time.
Appreciate it.